Wisconsin-Eye's Campaign 2022 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Hospital Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wisi.org/donate or by texting WISI to 44321.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. There we go. Welcome. Welcome to the Madison Club and the September 13th luncheon here at the Madison Club. We have a lot of events coming up. Some of them here, some of them not, but I'll just run through it. You can go to the website at WisPolitics.com and see these events and register for these events. Next week we'll be in D.C. on Wednesday, September 21, with a couple of top pollsters to talk about the top races in the environment, the political landscape across the country. That'll be taking place, a luncheon at the Monocle. It's also in association with MMAC's annual Milwaukee night. If you've never been to that, you should go. The WisPolitics plane, we had to put that in storage during COVID, so it's not ready to go yet, so you'll have to book your own flights. Okay, September 29th, right here, we have the annual polling summit. We have a great lineup. We'll be going from a long lunch format, and so you can register online there and see the lineup. We have a lot of good names, good pollsters, and a balanced panel. October 18th here, we're going to have a preview of the legislative elections, and we'll have a luncheon here on October 18th. Then on November 10th in Milwaukee at UWM, we're going to be doing a wrap-up on the results. I don't know what the results are yet, but we're going to have a wrap-up on November 10th at UW Milwaukee. That's not announced yet, but you can block it off on your calendar. I want to thank our sponsors for these Madison Club events. We couldn't do it without the sponsors, of course. Hush Blackwell, American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, and Anthem. So give the sponsors a round of applause, please. So we have a panel today on what a couple years ago I would have never even thought about having a panel on running elections in Wisconsin. But some things have happened, and it seems like there's continuing controversy over this. Kevin Kennedy, a former election administrator, is here. We were talking about the old days, which were sometimes fraught with difficulty, but nothing quite like this. So I thought it deserved a panel, and I think we've got an all-star group here to try to dissect things and answer your questions and try to get rid of some of the confusion that's surrounding all that's going on. So we have State Senator Kathy Bernier, and she's a Republican from Chippewa Falls. She's the outgoing chair of the Senate Elections Committee and a former clerk, Chippewa County Clerk. We have Meagan Wolfe, the administrator of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, the City of Portage Clerk, Marie Moe, who's also an officer in the Association of Clerks, and Dane County Clerk, Scott McDonell. So please welcome them. So let's just go down the line here, starting with the senator. You know, these last couple years have been, they've been crazy. I think they've been crazy from a lot of our standpoints, but certainly for those of running elections and trying to see whether there had to be changes in laws regarding how elections are run. So let's just start, we'll go down the line here, starting with the senator. What about these challenges? How do you view these challenges? What are the big challenges that we've had to grapple with, and what do you think are the big challenges ahead?
Well, I think 2020 had its challenges with COVID, but it also had some unusual things with third-party funding, mayors involving themselves in the electoral system, third-party advisors, Spitzer Rubenstein, who was offering his services, who was an out-of-state operative. I've taken slings and arrows by many of my people in my own party for saying there was no voter fraud. I want to make it perfectly clear. I've never said there was no voter fraud. What I said is, with all of these anomalies and different things that occurred that we hadn't experienced in the past, caused us to take a look at some of our laws that we have here in the state of Wisconsin to be more clear that third-party funding creates winners and losers. I voted against some of the bills that came through, and I drafted many of the bills that came through to address these sorts of things. But I made it very clear to my friends on my side of the aisle and the other that you can't disenfranchise all of the voters because of administrative issues or malfeasance. And so that was one of the challenges on the legislative side, to get everyone off the ceiling, down to the floor, and talk about what we can really do in a responsible manner, including clarifying and definitely confined. So I spent most of my session, even though on joint finance, just meeting with my colleagues, clarifying and rewriting election law, knowing full well that it was going to be labeled voter suppression and vetoed by the governor.
Okay, we'll come back to possible legislative fixes down the road. Okay, Meagan.
I think we're set. Yeah.
Okay, so what, a lot of stuff is running through the Elections Commission, and you're at the wheelhouse there. Just describe some of the challenges of the past couple of years and what you view as the big challenges ahead.
Thank you. I think that one of the biggest challenges for us at the Wisconsin Elections Commission, and as we attempt to support our local election officials, misinformation around elections. So there's so much bad information that floats around election administration. And so for us as election administrators to try to keep pace can be really challenging and really difficult. And then you add on top of that, there's a lot more legal challenges than there have been in the past to election administration as well. And so we're constantly playing catch up and trying to correct the bad information about elections and to make sure that people understand what the rules are as it pertains to how they interact with the election process. I also think another serious challenge that we face as election administrators is that the demands on election administrators has really grown in the last few years. So when you look at things like public records requests or demands to have access to elections, those are good. We're encouraged by people's wanting to engage with the election process, but it's also a huge increase in the demand on us as election administrators, and we're not seeing that the resources available to us at the state, the county, or the local level is keeping pace with a lot of those demands. And so I think in the future, really looking at that and seeing what's changed and how can we make sure that we're funding, we're resourcing elections in a way that allows us to keep pace.
Right. We'll come back to the new office at the Elections Commission. Okay, Marie Moe, who is the City of Portage clerk and an officer in the Association of Clerks. What about the last couple of years, what you and your fellow clerks have been going through, and what do you see the challenges ahead?
A whirlwind. Many new clerks. They come in right before the election. It's like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? We were dealing with conducting a safe election during the pandemic, safe for the voters, but also safe for our workers, trying to find people to work. The unprecedented number of requests from absentee ballots from small municipalities that maybe had 5 absentee requests, for an election, thinking that was a lot, to getting to be about 100. Certainly the third-party groups were out in full force helping us to get people either registered to vote or to get absentee requests. And people think that they're coming from the clerk's office, so they'll call me, why did you send this? I'm already registered. So it goes to the misinformation that we are trying to explain to them, that no, this did not come from us, but let us look. No, you are registered. No, you need to register. No, you need this. So a lot of our time has been spent on education, trying to get people to understand how the process does work, trying to get them to know that when they cast their absentee ballot, there's a chain of command, and we have documentation for everything we do. And I think that's important. So voter education certainly has come to the forefront for us, because we feel that if we have informed citizens and they understand, or at least we can explain the process to them, they can have some level of comfort that we take each of their ballot or each of their questions seriously. And then couple with that the changes that come down from the legislature, or how are we supposed to do this now, what's the policy, and then in turn trying to keep our poll workers aware too. I mean, we have training for them prior to each election, but we try to schedule our training so that hopefully nothing comes out from the state that, oops, what we just told you last week, now we got to quick backtrack, and then you got to learn this process. So we've had a lot of challenges in that.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, it's been a interesting couple of years. For us, the defining moment was doing a recount at Monona Terrace when there was no vaccine, and trying to do that with hundreds and hundreds of people in one space, and a lot of anger, a lot of misinformation. Really, that's been the definition of the last couple of years, is the misinformation. And the frustrating thing, and Marie mentioned trying to do a lot of voter education, and Megan mentioned how hard it is to keep up with it. The other problem is they're not listening to the same channels that you're broadcasting on. And if they actually heard it, they wouldn't believe it, because they've been told, don't believe that. That's fake news or whatever it is. So that is probably the hardest thing, because I'll try to show people, like, well, here's how that can't happen. But I feel like I'm talking to one grain of sand on a beach that's miles long. I'll give you an example. Mike Lindell said that 45,000 votes had been flipped somehow in Dane County. By the way, I don't think Mike Gableman ever asked him about that, because I never got asked about that. There was a recount in Dane County where we looked at every ballot, so that was clearly false. We actually publish every ballot image to the web, so you can go through and see how many people voted for you for Alder in a write-in, maybe you and your family and nobody else, but you can go through that and look at it for yourself, but they don't care. I mean, that's the reality of all that, is that once you are able to the frustrating thing that I've dealt with the last 2 years, once you can show them, no, there's a safeguard in place for this is how you do it, they've already moved on. They don't care about that anymore. They're on to the new thing, a building on campus. There's no way that many people voted from there. Well, yeah, they actually move in and out of those buildings on campus. That may not, if you lived here, you'd know that. So, the furniture on the sidewalk, you remember that part? This is the really frustrating thing, I think, for clerks. And the other thing is now, the last few months, just the unrelenting copy and paste open records requests. That is just killing clerks across the state, across the country, really. And that's a huge source of frustration.
Yeah, there was an article about that, about the nationwide phenomenon of the cut and paste open records request. Okay, let's just talk with Marie Moe, who's an officer in the association. Are your fellow clerks voicing that same frustration? Do you hear that frustration? They're constantly. I think you were phrasing it nicely. You're educating people, but I mean, from what Scott's saying, they're not listening.
That is true, and I think we've all encountered that. And certainly, I'm a full-time clerk. That's my main job. We have a lot of clerks from small municipalities that's their part-time job. So imagine them trying to keep up with everything that we're trying to keep up with. I think I told you, there's a sigh. It's like when you ask at our clerk meetings, how's it going with elections? You hear an audible sigh. It's just like, oh no, it just never ends. And that. But I think that, we're hopefully as an association trying to tell them we're here with you. We share knowledge within our association. We share war stories of, oh gosh, can you believe this? And also try to share with each other, ideas on what we do to, combat the misinformation and create networks to keep up with the latest information from WEC and the policies and procedures we're supposed to follow.
Okay, so Meagan Wolfe at the Wisconsin Elections Commission. So you also, I think, used the term misinformation. What is the commission doing to educate voters or educate the critics?
That is a great question. And I think every day I wake up thinking about what more can we be doing to educate people. And I think that we've got a number of things, a number of concrete things that we are doing. For example, we're working on our Elections 101, which is an educational program that we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks. And the intent of that is to teach high school students, so juniors and seniors, about how the mechanics of election administration works, but they're also really useful for the general public. And so we're going to be advertising those and encouraging people to learn about some of the basics of election information, election administration. But I think it's also just engaging with the public. I'm proud to say I don't think I've ever turned down an opportunity from anybody to talk about elections from either side of the aisle. I will talk to people that are in support of us. I will talk to people that are just vehemently against us and what we do as election administrators, because I want to make sure that people have access to good information about elections. And I think here in the state of Wisconsin, we're so lucky because we have 1,850 Marie Moes, right, in our state. In a lot of other states, they run elections at the county level. And our counties, they are really important in elections administration as well. But in every single community in Wisconsin, you have an election expert. You have a clerk, even in the smallest township in the state of Wisconsin. And so just continuing to encourage people to engage with those folks, to seek out those opportunities to learn the facts about elections. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take any of our words for it. Learn about it. Learn the facts, and then draw your own conclusion once you know them.
Okay, Senator, so, Chippewa County, there's some conservative people there and some Trump voters. What do you tell them when they claim that there's widespread fraud and that the election system is rigged?
Well, I took the time to type up part 1 and part 2, a total of about 6 or 7 pages of information on facts about how to run an election. And I sent that off to the Chippewa County Republican Party, and they sent it out by email. You cannot do anything with "I don't believe you." I have a dear friend, we're close friends, and he goes and defends my honor as best he can, but he doesn't agree with me. He's a computer programmer, and he knows in his mind, here's how you can sabotage or hack into something. Well, I am sure that there's not an IT person in this world that can't admit that they can hack into something. But you have to have access. You have to have the ability to get at that system in order to hack it. And there's processes in place to prevent that, number one. Number two, it's not in the internet world. The system isn't there. So I keep at it, explaining the system and where the checks and balances are. I had one group of men at an event that told me that they could copy ballots and put them in ballot boxes. And I said, really? No, you can't, and here's why. Number one, the ballots are specially made. They have timing marks on front and back, and you cannot print them off simply on a printer. Number two, all of the ballots are initialed by clerks and poll workers. And number three, you would have to have people in the polling place not watching you do it. So I just want to pull my hair out, and it's probably why I've made a lot of national news, because I've wanted to speak the truth and go against some of the things that the Republicans have been saying.
Okay, have any of you ever received a a serious threat? I'm not, I mean, okay, well, tell us about that, and how did you handle it, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two kinds of threats. The I hope you die threat, I mean, okay. I mean, those aren't the problem, really. Often they come from like a Proton email. There's no identifying it. Who knows where they are. But there are more specific threats. I've got this one guy who's been threatening me forever when I was on the county board, and it continues to now. Specific threats. He's just mentally ill. I've gotten some other threats that are, the hard ones are like, you've committed sedition, you should die, you should watch out. I mean, when you tell law enforcement about those, they're not specific. It's frustrating for clerks, and I'm sure, what do you say? I mean, like, do they have? It's like a game of Clue. Do they have to tell you it's going to be in the billiards room with a wrench at 4 p.m. or something? I mean, the more serious threats seem to have been, lodged against the Election Commission and Meagan, and then the Milwaukee and Dane clerks. I mean, Milwaukee and Madison clerks. But it's been going on all over the country, and I think that there's a lot of threatening behavior, even if it's not you should die. It's sort of this angry, threatening emails and coming to meetings, and it's happening around the state. I hear about it from clerks all over the place. And we worry that it's going to have a really negative effect on recruiting clerks. In this economy, you can just go work at Costco or someplace and make the same money. And then what happens is their replacement makes a mistake because they're learning their job, and it fuels sort of a cycle of, see, there's problems.
Okay, let's just also talk about I think this is a standard phrase in any report or any media coverage. There is no evidence of widespread fraud. But, fraud that gets prosecuted is very, 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 very rare. So why not just say there's very little fraud instead of no widespread fraud? Go ahead, Scott. If the green light's on, it's on.
Okay. Yeah, we refer, people may not realize this, we're referring people to the DA all the time. A lot of times it'll be, the most common one is someone in a senior center votes absentee, then they forget, then the bus pulls up, and then they go to the polling place and they try to vote again, or maybe the ballot. It's fraud, but it's kind of that nothing happens. The DA decides not to prosecute someone with dementia. Okay, but we get other times. There's people who've tried to vote in 2 counties. They get caught. They try to get caught in 2 states. They try to vote in Illinois, and those get referred. So I think sometimes the DA has a hard time, establishing exactly what happened, but we're constantly doing that. We do it in Dane County all the time. I'm sure they do it in Portage.
Yeah, so we do that as well. And we'll occasionally have the incident that somebody's going to school in Madison and, oh, wow, we want to vote for the Madison mayor, but, oh, gosh, there's a school board issue back here in Portage. So you've got an 18-year-old going off to college, and lo and behold, it's like, how are they trying to get an absentee ballot in Madison when we've already mailed them one? And certainly with the WisVote system, that's flagged right away. When the second request comes in, they'll see that, oh gosh, this person has an absentee ballot from Portage and they're registered in Portage. So yeah, we investigate that. I know there was one occasion a few years ago, one college student, this is prior to WisVote, did vote in Portage in Madison. We turned it over to our local DA. Dane County turned it over to the local DA here, and they did go and find the student to say, hey, what were you doing? So they are investigated, but it doesn't make the news. Right. Because it's just we're doing our job, we're doing what we're supposed to do, and so we turn it over to the DAs, and then it's up to them, but they do follow through.
Okay, so the Elections Commission does an annual report, so.
Right, yeah, that's what I was going to add. So the Elections Commission, and when I say Elections Commission, I'm talking about the 6 election commissioners that make the decisions. They have very limited places where they can make referrals, but what we can do is, like Marie mentioned, in our statewide voter registration database, every single day we're looking at voter records. And if we identify something that's anomalous, so let's say there's multiple records, multiple participation that happened in 2 different jurisdictions, somebody that has registration or participation recorded for them, but they're marked as deceased, that is information we flag for the clerks, and then they're able to use that to make referrals. Another really important thing that we do that this commission does have the authority to be able to refer is utilizing ERIC data to make cross-state referrals. So ERIC allows us to get information from all the member states of ERIC in terms of who has participated in an election. So after a presidential election, after any November general election, we do those comparisons, and if it's found that somebody voted more than once in 2 different states, then the commission refers those to law enforcement. And so I think that's a really important tool as well. And like you mentioned, all these instances of voter fraud, at the state, at the local level, we take these incredibly seriously, and then we actually provide a report that's available to the public and that we provide to the legislature after every single election about the referrals that have been made.
Right, and, you know, the number of referrals is what? Like fewer than 100, fewer than 50, right? Each election, right?
I think the coordinated or massive voter fraud is the misconception that there was a coordinated effort for one particular party to get ballots to people that didn't ask for them. You heard a lot that I received a ballot. I did have a constituent that said she gave it to me. She got 2 ballots. I believe the clerk made a mistake, or whoever was assisting the clerk, and didn't check her off and sent her 2. I said, but rest assured, if you would have returned both ballots, they would have recognized that there was a problem because you would have been recorded as having already voted, and both ballots would not have counted. And so once again, it's a problem that people don't really understand the system. You know, clerks were unique individuals because you don't go to college to learn how to be a clerk, like you learn how to be a nurse or a lab technician. There's no specific educational program that teaches you how to be a clerk, and it is not obvious to the average citizen what it is that you actually do.
Okay, let's talk about some specific things that are rolling around in the courts. First off, let's talk about it's in the news today about the Waukesha County decision. A judge there decided that there should be different advice given to clerks on curing of ballots. And the curing of ballots, maybe that's a misnomer or a term. I'll allow you folks to define it. But and the Wisconsin Elections Commission has asked for a stay of that ruling to avoid confusion. So I guess first to you, Meagan Wolfe of the Elections Commission Administrator, about the confusion that is reigning, I guess, in the system, and why you wanted this decision stayed, and then explain, I guess, about any guidance you have provided in the past.
Well, thanks for that. So today, it's my understanding this happened right before this event, but that the stay was not granted in that case, and so tonight, at 4:15, the commission will be meeting to decide what to do with the judge's temporary injunction in the matter. And so they'll decide what to do with the guidance that's currently in place. There's 2 memos at question, and so they'll be taking a vote on that. And so, which I think is an important point to make, is that anytime we have these types of decisions, it has to go before our bipartisan commission in a public meeting, and then they have to figure out how to comply with the court's order. And so that's what will happen tonight. This was guidance that has been in place since 2016. So it's been guidance that's been in place for 2 presidential elections. And essentially what it does is it allows our municipal clerks to, if they have reliable information on a witness's address, to be able to add that information to the absentee certificate. Clerks are never making changes to a voter's ballot. That is something that cannot happen. That is something that does not happen. What this is because the law does not define what the components of an address are, that the clerks, based on reliable information, can add that to the witness certificate. Now,
So the envelope.
Yeah, the envelope, yep. But now if the witness doesn't sign, or if the voter doesn't sign, or if there's just no information there at all, then that ballot can't be counted. But these are instances where maybe somebody has not included their zip code, or maybe they say 123 Main Street and don't have a municipality, that the clerk can add that information based on reliable information.
Okay, so that guidance is in danger of being eliminated, and new guidance may have to be provided.
We'll find out tonight.
Okay, so Marie Moe and Scott McDonell, tell us what that kind of thing means at this time of the election season.
We pay attention every day to see what the latest guidance is. Certainly with the current process in place, I mean, we take great care. We look at the certificate envelope when it comes back through the mail system to make sure it has all the voter signature, the witness signature, and address. If it doesn't, we make contact with that voter and tell them, this isn't sufficient. Your certificate is missing something. And we document everything we do. We document when it comes in, what's missing from it. We document when we called the voter, who we talked to, what they wanted to do, if they want to have that certificate envelope sent back so they can fix the problem. We'll do that. They might want to come in our office with their witness to rectify the situation. Our job is to make sure that every voter who wishes to cast a ballot and does so lawfully has that opportunity, and it's part of our job to, notify them that, hey, look, something is missing. It's going to be rejected unless you get it fixed for us in that. And so we let it up to them. And then on election day as well, Meagan mentioned a missing zip code. Our poll workers take that seriously because sometimes people we contact say, oh, we don't care, do whatever you want with the ballot. And we're like, well, it will go to the polls, but then the poll workers will need to make a determination whether to reject that or to process that. And I know in August we did have an instance where we had a few certificates that the witness did not put their zip code. And our poll workers, everybody thinks they're sitting back there not doing anything. They took about 20 minutes discussing back and forth whether or not they should process that ballot because of the zip code missing. That was the only thing missing. So they're taking their job very seriously to protect a voter's right in what's right and wrong. So we just we stay tuned, and we'll be eagerly waiting for the Elections Commission's guidance tonight as to what our process will be.
Yeah, I think the main effect is just workload. I mean, when you're not doing open records requests, now you're curing these. You're trying to send the ballots back for voters to fix. I think, we just did a recount in the 2nd Congressional District for Congress from the Republican side, and 130,000 ballots. There was only about 20 ballots that were affected by what we're talking about right now. So. But that was because a lot of clerks doing that work of contacting the voter and telling them there was a problem and getting them back to them. From our perspective, the point of the witness address is so that you can law enforcement can investigate voter fraud. That's the point of it being on there. So then the question is, what's an address? I mean, for me, it's can they find this person and interview them, right? So does the address have to say USA at the end? Does it need a zip code? For us, our board of canvas, if it said 123 Main Street 53703, that's fine. We know exactly where that is. Or if it just said Madison, doesn't need a zip code. But this is the thing: if you're a candidate and you're down 10 votes, then oh my God, it has to have a zip code. And if you were on the other side, you'd be like, no, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter because we're talking about a recount. But that some clarity from the Election Commission on address would be nice, actually.
Okay, so why doesn't state law, Senator Bernier, why doesn't state law specify?
Thank you for asking, because the governor didn't sign it. We had a bill.
That was a setup, I guess. For you.
That was a very good setup. We had a bill that said if the state and the zip was missing, that it could be accepted. Now, I'm going to go back, and it's like when I was a county clerk, they were called affidavits. They were legal documents, and I think they still are, as called certificate envelopes. They are legal documents. And as my friend, the county clerk, mentioned down there, when you're in the heat of a recount, everything needs to really be legal. And so if it's an opinion of the Wisconsin Election Commission that you don't have to fill anything in, or I believe, in my opinion, it is still a legal document, and anyone changing that document needs to be accountable as well. And I wouldn't, as a municipal clerk, want to make changes to a legal document, even when I think, which is subjective, that I have reliable information. I don't think that's a good idea. So I think the legislature will pass the bill again and say that these things can be missing, but everything else must be in place. And if not, the clerks can contact, if time allows, the voter. Illinois does that. Minnesota does that. They contact the voter. That way it's not subjective and it's not reliable information, and it is not random. So that's where we're at on the legislative front.
Okay, Scott and Marie, would you welcome a law that said that?
Yeah, what I would like is a law that just said that. That was 2 sentences long, and then you do 20 of them. Because what happens is they get bundled together, and then the whole bill goes down. So decouple everything, pass a whole bunch of bills, and we'll get some of them through.
Oh, you're saying the problem was that these were all lumped together in an election package that the governor didn't want to sign. Okay. That if an individual bill came through that was non-controversial, say that one, or the sign or the counting of absentee ballots on day of election, those things would go through.
Well, in the pre-processing bill, the Monday processing bill, which there was a lot of support for, Senator Lemahieu wrote the bill, put it in, and then voted against it. So the whole thing is just dysfunctional right now, is what I would say.
Okay, so we've arrived at 2 bills that could pass and maybe get signed by a Democratic governor, right? You're allowed to count absentee ballots, before 8 o'clock on election night, and you're allowed and specify what can be fixed on an absentee ballot. Okay, would you welcome that? I'm sorry I interrupted you, Marie.
No,
would you welcome that?
No, I would welcome that too, and I think that poll workers throughout the state would welcome that too, because then they don't have to spend time discussing should we or shouldn't we, and that would make it much easier.
So I'm not going to put you in the fix there, Meagan, but guidance from the Election Commission can change. So a bill is more certain than guidance.
Right, yeah, and in most instances, the guidance doesn't have the force of law, right? And so in order for something to really be, I think, what I'd want as a clerk, it really does need to be solidified as an administrative rule or as a bill, law.
All right, the other thing that's bouncing around out there is for those who have disabilities to get assistance. I guess I was surprised this was a controversy because it's like, wow, certain people, cannot get to the polls. But there are details, and there was a federal judge who said, the Elections Commission needs to issue guidance on this again. So this is still kind of up in the air. I think there's a bill introduced yesterday by a Republican in the legislature to make certain of this, And then there still are calls for certifying, if I'm getting this right, that the person who helps the person with disabilities has to be certified somehow. What is the current state of if I'm a voter with disabilities? What's the current state of me being able to vote? Let's just start with Meagan on that.
Sure. So last week the commission met following the U.S. District Court's ruling, and they did put out guidance to voters, and I would say, to clerks, but I'd also say to voters as well. And basically the guidance says that if someone is unable to return their absentee ballot because of a disability, that they can choose an assister of their choosing. It just can't be an employer or a representative of their labor union, and that person can return or mail their ballot for them. And it's a self-certification by that voter. And the commission also did provide sort of a script for the local election officials that they may use to ask the person that's returning it if they are indeed returning that ballot on the behalf of a voter who has self-certified as unable to do it themselves because of a disability. So that's where the guidance currently stands in terms of the commission implementing the U.S. District Court's decision.
Okay, so anyway, how does Dane County and how does the City of Portage handle voters with disabilities now, and will this change because of the federal ruling?
Okay, so if a voter has a disability, like Meagan says, it's self-certifying. So, you're taking the person, if you get a ballot in the mail, you're assuming that they're disabled, meet the qualifications. That's kind of one of the problems. I mean, it's great to have advice, but that's one of the problems because self-certifying, leads to questions in the age that everybody's questioning everything that we've done. How do you know this ballot that you got back, that the person had a disability? You have to, right now, assume, following the guidance of the Elections Commission, that they're following the rules and they fall under that.
Okay, well, what would be the answer for you? You said that's an issue. What would solve the issue for you?
I would like something put in a law in black and white as far as what we are to do. And I know that's a difficult thing, but that gets the guidance out of it and the self-certification. It's like, okay, you either are or you're not. But I think you have to be careful, too, because as you craft that law, you have to be careful of everybody's rights. And ultimately, we want any qualified voter to be able to participate in our elections. So it's a complicated walk.
Right, and, there is a federal ADA law.
Correct.
Okay, okay. So what does Dane County do for voters with disabilities, and is this changing how you're going to do things?
It's sort of, in a way, it changes it back. I think it's helpful to have a script so that we're all using the same language. So that's very helpful, and we appreciate that. Voters, you don't want to be asking people about their disabilities. Well, how disabled are you? I don't think that's disabled enough. Well, that's the sort of thing that's why the law is written the way it is, or the ruling in that case, the federal law, and then this ruling is really about, protecting people's privacy and their right to vote. I think, there's this, that one of the real victims over the last few years have been people with disabilities and how hard it is for them to vote, being basically accused of fraud just because they're disabled, and it's a challenge for them. And, a lot of the system does rely on an oath. When you sign that you're as a witness, you're swearing to that you saw this person put down an envelope. There has to be that level of trust in the system, and I just think we really need to think about our fellow citizens and have compassion for them when they're in these situations. And so I'm grateful for that ruling.
All right, before we go out for questions from the audience, Senator, would there be a legislative fix for this, do you think?
Yeah, I think hand in hand, this works in with the indefinitely confined. We fine-tuned the indefinitely confined statute, so it is really intended and works with the indefinitely confined community. The disability community, 8 different organizations filed in favor of that indefinitely confined. So I can see where this could be bundled. Clerk Scott.
You don't have to bundle it, though.
Okay,
you can just
I know.
pass each
but
idea,
it could
and
be,
then they can go.
because it works hand in hand together. The certificate envelope, more than likely, I would guess, if my disabled community, probably their witness is probably the one that takes it to the mailbox or drops it off. So, you already have that witness signature on the certificate envelope. So this all, like all election laws, we can all agree, kind of commingle with others where there's the checks and balances in place. So I think we can do, we can probably do a better job. But, I was reading the minutes when the Wisconsin Election Commission met on this. And here's my problem for you lawyers in the group. I'm sorry. But because of a disability is an argument in a vote on the Wisconsin Election Commission to the word due to a disability. Now, what the heck is the difference? And so this is where we're at in the world of elections and politics. It's just everything is an argument. And so several votes to get to support some sort of guidance on the ADA federal law, and the federal law is the federal law.
Right. We should point out that the Elections Commission is evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. So there's a lot of deadlocked votes. Okay, let's open it up for some questions. You can raise your hand, and I'll call on you. You can shout it out. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so the question is, are the poll workers representative of the voters in that community? Why don't we go to Marie on that?
Okay, the city of Portage isn't as diverse as Madison is. So, ours are totally different. Our poll workers in general, though, we have representation from a younger group of poll workers way up to a more elderly group of poll workers. So, we're representative of all the ages and that in pretty much, the face of what our community is and that. So I would say that we do pretty good.
Yeah, I know there's a strong effort, Dan, in places like Madison to recruit poll workers so that it's culturally sensitive. And also, it's a security feature. If you live in that neighborhood, you know who lives there. That's true in the townships, and then we try to mimic that in the larger cities too, because sometimes that can get lost in a bigger city. On the pandemic, mostly terrible, as we all know, but there was an ability to recruit some more poll workers. So on campus, we had a lot more students who were working the polls, and that's sort of a similar situation. One of the things, one thing I would urge a lot of clerks to look at around the state is the machines and the equipment that we have a lot of capabilities that aren't really used. So, for example, on the express votes, which are like a disability, you touch screen it and then it prints a ballot, you can load that with Spanish. So all of our machines have Spanish across the whole county. There's no requirement to do that, but you can. It's not that hard. So sometimes there's capabilities there that we could use to make it easier for folks. A lot of people can speak English really well, but sometimes when you're looking at a complicated referendum, it can be a little tougher.
All right, other questions out there? Go ahead. Silver linings of the pandemic from an elections administration standpoint.
There's always silver linings. I mean, it really forced us to take a look at how we had our polling place set up and how we functioned the whole way through the building. So we actually we flipped our whole layout of our polling place to, and in turn, it makes the flow work a whole lot better post-pandemic. And that, but yeah, we took a look at all our processes and that. Some we did specially for the pandemic. But yeah, there was good that did come out of it because it did improve different processes for us.
You didn't once think, boy, I wish we had mail-in election ballots in this state and that nobody showed up at the polls. That would have made it a heck of a lot easier. Okay.
Sure. I will say an example I had was when we did the recount in 2020, after the fact, I was sort of annoyed that Milwaukee got done before us. And so I tried to figure out, how did Milwaukee get done before us? And they had a different layout that was better. So I copied it, and it worked great. I'm like, well, so that's what you learn, you know. And so from that point of view, also, you know, we're looking at a new election facility. I mean, you guys need to understand that that Michigan and Wisconsin run their elections one way, and nobody else runs it like that. So Minnesota has, 300 election officials, and we have 1,800. It's completely different. Normally you can compare Minnesota and Wisconsin. No. But one thing we can do is cooperatively set up, like they do in other states, where we have a more secure facility, where we can secure the ballots, the machines, make sure workers are safe. That they do that all over the country. It's not something that happens that often in Michigan and Wisconsin. So we're going to work toward doing that. It's not our setup, but we can do it cooperatively.
Just a quick one to add to that, too. I think from the state perspective, it forced us to have to really expand some of our technological solutions. So, for example, when we're a state that was doing 6% absentee by mail, it was really a pen and a stamp process. When you move up to 66% of voters that are using absentee by mail, now you have to come up with some technological solutions, both for the clerks and for the voters. And so it allowed us to do things like implement intelligent mail barcodes so that you can actually track your absentee ballot through the mail system. And that does a couple of things. It gives voters confidence. They can make sure their ballot got back. But it also allows us to check and make sure that the data makes sense, that every ballot's meeting its milestones. And if it's not, then the clerk can work with that voter to make sure they get a ballot in time. And so there were a lot of really excellent technological improvements, I think, that were made because of COVID and the increase in absentees. And also, I'll just say, too, the partnerships that came from us having to solve problems during COVID were just fantastic. It was just phenomenal. I mean, it was the most challenging point in my career, probably, and I had the easy job compared to all of you. But it was also one of the things I'm most proud of, is how we were able to coordinate with our partners to be able to solve a lot of really what felt like impossible problems at the time.
And I think, too, with My Vote, the expansion of My Vote, from our perspective in our office, that was probably one of the best things, because if a person requested an absentee ballot through My Vote, they had to include their photo ID if we didn't have it, instead of just sending us a note, oh, I want an absentee ballot, and then we'd have to contact them back to say, oh, you need photo ID. So the expansion of My Vote, I think, was a great thing throughout the state, and I know that a lot of clerks, are very happy for that, because it made it much easier, and the processing of absentee requests is a lot better through that now.
We cannot forget about the ballot drop boxes, as well as being an aid to those massive numbers of, and yes, we're all aware of the ruling, and there's no law that allows for it and all of that sort of thing. I had that conversation with Dean Knudsen 2 years ago, but the fact of the matter is we did have a provision in one of the proposed bills that would allow for at least some of them. And that too went down in flames because probably it was bundled. But I think that may make it back because I know that though we love our postal service, they're not as efficient. Back in the olden days, I could mail something to someone across town and they would get it the next day. that just doesn't happen anymore. And so I think that we need to probably take another look at that.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, you're okay with unmanned drop boxes, secure unmanned drop boxes.
Well, we had a bill a Republican bill, by the way, that allowed for drop boxes, at least one at a municipality, town, city, village, at least one that was on municipal property and was monitored electronically. And that bill also allowed for municipalities that were larger to have up to 3, as I recall. So you could go around the city, like in Madison, and there'd be one, pick your points, where there would be located. There wouldn't be one on every corner, of course, because it's hard to monitor massive numbers of them. But I think that the bill allowed for everyone to utilize a ballot box drop box.
Okay, but there's not going to be unmanned drop boxes in this election.
No, because everyone's out campaigning right now, and they're not coming in to pass bills.
Okay. I just want to make,
Well, just a point. I mean, the Madison had them at every fire station where there were people there and cameras. I don't know what the problem. I mean, and I think about those blue drop boxes with the eagle on the side of it that has no camera on it everywhere. I just don't understand the whole argument. It's one of these things that is ginned up for political reasons, not for, it's very frustrating. Kathy.
And I don't disagree with you, Scott, but we all have to meet in the middle.
So I can just create some position so far left that you have to come all the way over all the way past the socialists, past everybody over here. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Scott, it is not socialist or far right to have checks and balances in place for ballot drop boxes.
I agree with security on the drop box.
You all came for a debate, didn't you? And when Scott's in the room, you'll get one.
Well, you got the last word, Senator. That's good. That's an achievement. All right, you had a question. Go ahead. Didn't you have a question? Okay, so you, if I'm summarizing here, you're feeling that we have all this controversy over election administration when that's not the thing to worry about. That's what you're saying. Okay, well, let's. Okay, so that's a comment, and then I have a final question here from, go ahead, sir. Okay, let me, the question is about the fake electors, but let me talk about this. We've talked about there's 1,800 election officials in the state versus 300 in Minnesota. And so let me ask whether should election administration be centered in an elected official like a Secretary of State, or do you like it the way it is? Which is most preventative of fraud in the system?
Okay, so the fraud prevention and election administration starts with the legislature, with laws that are signed by the governor and become statutes. That's where it starts. The executive branch, which Meagan works for, that type of executive branch, not under the executive, but that organization is to carry out state law as it was intended. Now, I have major problems with them not doing administrative rules dating back to JB and various other things. So, I mean, I take my issues. Anyway, but the fact of the matter is we need an organization with several numbers of people working in that organization because everything is high tech now. So the Secretary of State, I would not have any confidence with them heading it up, but we do definitely need an agency that's going to carry out the will of the legislature and the state statutes. And it's not necessarily the Secretary of State.
Okay, so you don't want to go that route, but you want to sort of fix the system as it is, like tweak the system.
Well, we need a seventh member on the Wisconsin Election Commission to break the ties because we don't have the words with who's disabled or disability or whatever. We need a tiebreaker there, and I have a bill that I'm going to pass on to my colleagues when I'm gone. To get that tiebreaker person on that. I think that would be so helpful for the staff because...
wow, who would that be?
Well, you can read the bill. It's a public record, I think. But it would be a nonpartisan, we would go back to a nonpartisan, retired judicial person that would be agreed upon by both the Democrats and Republican leadership and then appointed by the Chief Justice.
All right.
That would be the tiebreaker.
Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead. You want to weigh in on this?
I can. I mean, I certainly won't take an opinion on, what the legislative process may yield in terms of, changes to the election administration system. But what I will point out is that, to the question that was posed, there are so many checks on our system, so many things that have to go a particular way in order for things like an election to be certified. And I think a lot of times, there's sort of this tendency to feel like the sky is falling, this bad thing happened, and so everything's falling apart. I'm going to stay on the side of optimism here and say that there are so many people of integrity that are involved in elections that I really feel confident that we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay because there are people of integrity that are involved in that process and checking that process. And when it comes to the commission, other states don't have a system like ours. In other states, in more than 40 states, the chief election official, which is the role I serve in as a nonpartisan election administrator, is the Secretary of State, so an elected partisan person, where they're able to make decisions unilaterally. With the commission structure, we have a bipartisan commission, and yes, sometimes it can be frustrating because yes, sometimes they do have deadlock votes or long, drawn-out discussions, but at the end of the day, they're able to come up with bipartisan solutions to really complicated problems on a lot of matters. And so I do think that that's something that needs to be thought about, that needs to be weighed if there is consideration of changing our model, is that we do have something really unique here where all those decisions are made in a public meeting and in a bipartisan way. And you don't see that with other models in other states.
Right, you can, and if you really don't have anything going on, you can tune in tonight. Okay, go ahead, Marie. What about, do you like the system the way it is? You're part of it. I mean, would you, you've recommended some other things, but would you like it centralized in one place and where go to the Minnesota model where you'd have a lot fewer election officials?
I'm like Megan. I'm a nonpartisan election official, and so I'll leave that for the greater minds at the Capitol to figure out. And then our job will be just to take their lead and follow the rules.
All right, Scott's not a nonpartisan, but
No.
go ahead.
No, I think, actually, I want to thank Kathy again for everything you've done the last few years and the abuse you've taken, and not a lot of people do that, so thank you for your integrity. Even when I disagree with you, I always know that you're trying to do the right thing. So, and I like your bill. I do think there needs to be a tie break of some kind. I remember the old GAB would frustrate me because I'd be in the audience, and the judges were trying to do the right thing, but they didn't know anything about elections, and they were kind of flailing around. And so the nice thing about the current model is there's 2 clerks on there, and so I like to keep our model and change it a little bit. I will say, though, there's been, partisan election officials in Georgia who've done the right thing. I think it really comes down to the people taking their oath seriously. That's really the key to all of this. If there are laws in place and someone tries to break them, it goes to court. And we've had like Justice Hagedorn and others who really seem to me stick to the law and not try to wander off into what benefits somebody. I will say there's a basic problem or at least discussion here. Do you believe in nonpartisan anything? Because there's 2 streams of thought where there can be nonpartisan people who take an oath and administer the elections, and others are like, there's no such thing as nonpartisan. People are something, so just tell us what you are, whatever that is. And I still believe that people can be nonpartisan and execute their job in a neutral way, take an oath. And I hope we get back to, I hope that argument wins out at the end of the day.
All right, that's a good way to end it. I really appreciate the panel. I want to thank Walmart, ARP, Wisconsin, Anthem, Hush Blackwell, American Family Insurance, and Xcel Energy. Let's hear it for the panel.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civic broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.
Wisconsin Eye relies on contributions from you. Your tax-deductible investment in WisEye supports access to unfiltered, beginning-to-end coverage of Campaign 2022 and state capitol proceedings, available to you 24/7. Help us reach our goal of raising $30,000 by making a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321. Thank you for your support.